Welcome back from the break, and I would like now to talk with you about how sustainability analytics can help you to reduce and even zero your carbon footprint, but also how to make smart decisions. And actually, I would like to start my presentation with a statement that CO2 reporting as itself is very important, but it's not sufficient. And I want to explain to you now why I say so. Last year in 2021, Westernacher built its own carbon footprint monitor to analyze and understand our own carbon emissions. Out of this understanding, we were able to offset our emissions and to become net zero. We used the carbon footprint monitor to really deep dive into our emissions. And we had very interesting insights. Before 2020, actually, more than 90% of all our emissions came from our travel. And the majority of travel came from flights. Now, in 2020, COVID hit us all, and all the travel restrictions from the pandemic really forced us to stay at home, also all our consultants, and due to this, we were able to reduce our footprint by more than 70%. Of course, before we also had emissions from our offices, from our work equipment, but in comparison to the travel that was really high before 2020, the percentage was pretty low. So also the focus was not that big on reducing these emissions. Now that our travel activities are still on a relatively low level, not as high as they were before 2020, the share of emissions that come from work and office equipment has increased significantly. So we at Westernacher also need to see now how we can improve here. It's not only about improving our travel activities, but also all other emissions. So these insights we gained from our carbon footprint monitor, from our actual data. Now the question is, how do we turn this into actions, into targets? What do we derive out of this? And this is something you can only do if you think about the future. And the future is all about looking ahead, setting up a strategy, and thinking about risk to your own company. These risks come from your own emissions, but also from your partner's network, from your suppliers, everything that you buy in. And carbon pricing puts a significant risk to your company. In 2022, so this year, the carbon price for a ton of CO2 is at 25 euro. In 3 years, so in 2025, it's already at 55 euros, so more than doubled. 1 year later, it's possibly at 65 euro. And this is as of now. With what Ben already discussed before the break, you can see that governments and companies need to act now. So I'm more or less sure that these prices will not stay. So in 2025, probably the prices are far higher. So there is a significant risk to your company that you need to evaluate. So yeah, reporting is good. It's relatively easy because all the data that you need to understand your business you already have available, but the planning of the future, evaluating the risk, setting up strategy, that is a supreme discipline. And up until now, companies only needed to focus on 2 topics, top line and bottom line. What do I need to do to improve my operations? Where can I improve efficiencies? And what does it cost me? Or what do I gain as additional revenues, profits? That were the traditional layers for decision taking. But now, with sustainability, we have an additional layer with the green line that influences the other 2 layers. It's a dependency. When I want to improve in sustainability, probably I need to invest. And this invest will cost us something. There is probably also a positive impact because customers will more easily buy with your company, but it will also certainly impact your operations. Processes need to be adapted, you will need to buy from different suppliers, and so on and so on. And of course, up until now, evaluating strategies for operations and finance were already pretty complex. Now with sustainability on top, it becomes even more complex. And this is something which needs to be taken care of. And sustainability analytics can be the driver and the support that you need as a company to really fulfill these requirements. And I would now like to show a demo of 2 use cases that could easily be true in your own company and how these can be evaluated and simulated with Sustainability Analytics and SAP Analytics Cloud. Let's now come to our first example, how SAP Analytics Cloud can help you to simulate and plan carbon emissions and to show up the implications from carbon emissions on your financial planning. Our first demo is about a regular use case you can have in companies. It's about the decision where to build a new IT server farm. And in our example, the company is located with their headquarters in UK. So the decision is to build it in UK or to go offshore and build the server farm in India. And before looking at all these sliders to change the parameters, let's now focus first at the center of the demo. And what you can see here is a comparison of the investment and energy cost between UK and India. The light blue is UK, the dark blue is India. And as you can already see, for sure, UK is more expensive. Yeah? So construction costs are higher, employee costs are higher, and also the running costs are far higher than in India. So in general, now you could say, well, decision is very easy. Let's move on with India. But what about the impact from carbon emissions? If we look at the carbon emissions for a 2-year period, we see that 5 million kilograms of CO2 are emitted in UK due to a better energy mix, whereas in India, 30 million of CO2 will be emitted. So this is already a big influence, right? But when it comes to the impact on your financial planning, you will see, well, although the emissions are 6 times higher in India, the cost in UK are higher. Why? Well, because carbon taxation in UK is far higher, and India does until now not put such a high focus on this. So if we come to the total cost of ownership for a 10-year period, we will see that the whole ends up with 10 million of cost for UK, whereas we almost have 7 million in India. Very easy with these settings to decide to go to India. But now, as you have already noticed, there are certain parameters that we should consider if we want to really come to a final conclusion. And these parameters are volatile, so we cannot say that they are carved in stone. For example, let's assume that India or the Indian government actually also wants to fight or have bigger efforts in fighting climate change and increases carbon taxation. Right now, carbon taxation is only 10 cents, whereas in UK it's 55 cents. That explains why, although we have less carbon emissions, the costs are far higher in UK.
But if we assume that India would just a bit more than double their pricing on carbon emissions, we will now have the recalculation. And as you can see, wow, suddenly the total costs for India are higher over time. And this, of course, comes from carbon taxation. And for 10 years, the TCO is with 11 million. UK, of course, stayed untouched. Now, you would say, well, if India wants to increase their efforts to fight global warming, then they will probably also adjust their energy mix. So the conversion factor, which is right now at 0.8 for the electricity and only 0.15 in UK, this one will improve. So let's assume it improves. And perhaps we just go down to 0.6. And then you will see, yes, still far higher the carbon cost in India than in UK, but the total cost of ownership now has decreased significantly, and we are at 9.45. For sure, we might also assume that UK might become a bit better, and as they are very, very progressive on this, they will perhaps even increase the cost. And then it suddenly levels out. So the difference in total cost of ownership is very insignificantly. On the other side, so now you have the decision, basically you can go to UK or India. Now it might be the question of, do I want to say that everything is produced, that I'm a local company, yeah, which might also attract customers more than having offshore resources in place. Also having more employees from UK might be a good reasoning for this. As you can see, it's not that easy to decide which way to go. But with these parameters, you can really simulate each case individually. For sure, the gold standard would be to have adjustments and parameters per period to adjust, but I think you see this already goes into this direction. The second example that I want to show to you is also kind of a business case, but it goes into a different direction. As you know, according to Greenhouse Gas Protocol, companies are taxed also for their supplier emissions. So for all the products that they buy in, for example, and this is now the case that I want to take up here. We now have a company that buys CPUs from suppliers. And right now we want to compare two suppliers. The light blue one is a company called Tech Supplies, and the dark blue one is a company called IT Solutions. And as you can already see, the purchase price from Tech Supplies is far higher and only 75% at IT Solutions. So from your procurement manager would say, we need to continue our business with IT Solutions. They have the best deal for our company, which in fact is not true, because now your controlling department has put up this business case, and they looked into the sustainability strategy of both companies. And for Tech Supplies, well, they will be net zero in 2030 already, whereas IT Solutions will be net zero from 2040. So 10 years more of carbon emissions that you need to pay. And if we now look up until 2045, you will see that the cost for Tech Supplies, the total cost, procurement plus carbon emissions, are lower than for IT solutions. And this we have also brought up here into this chart again. So IT solutions, which is having less cost in procurement, is the dark blue one, and the light blue one is tech supplies. And what you can see here is it's a cumulative value. And whereas only after 2040 or 2039 we stay flat, so no additions in carbon emissions, this is already true from 2029 onwards for tech supplies. And if we now compare the procurement costs, which are at 2.4 for tech supplies and 1.8 for IT solutions, if you add up both values, well, you will see this comparison base. So 2.9 million for tech supplies and TCO versus 3.4 for IT solutions. So in this case, you should really change either your contract to tech supplies, or you discuss with IT solutions, hey, your competing companies do actually have better sustainability strategies. What can you do about this? Where can you become more carbon efficient? Yeah. And of course, again here, we need to think about what happens if the cost for carbon emissions increase. Right now, we know that in Germany, in 2025, the cost will be at 55 euro per kilogram. Yeah. And 1 year later, it can already be 65. That is already in discussions. And if that is recalculated, you will see the difference even increases. For sure, we can also simulate what happens if our IT solutions company will become net zero 5 years earlier. Of course, now you might say, well, discussing with IT solutions is worthwhile, and you are right. They have better prices, so perhaps they can do something about the sustainability strategy. And if we then simulate this, you will also see that this definitely has a positive impact. Yeah, so now let's just assume that IT solutions will be 5 years earlier net zero, and we will see that the TCO has decreased significantly. Yeah. So again, this is something where your partner can actually work on. But for sure, tech supplies is also looking carefully at the competition. And perhaps they do know that the competition is not as sustainable as we might expect them to be. So with our knowledge, they could also come up to the conclusion, well, we should increase our prices even further. So they could say, let's increase our price by 10%. And then, as you can see, we are still cheaper than our competition with IT solutions. And this is something which can only be in such an easy way be simulated if you have a tool such as SAP Analytics Cloud in use.
I hope these two examples showed you how in real life of a usual company, sustainability analytics needs to be in the future a central tool. We do all do this already for financials, actual reporting, financial planning. It's the daily job in each company, but this is also a central aspect that needs to be taken up and considered for sustainability. Thank you very much for your time.